Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Aphelion Point. My name is Eric, and thank you so much for joining me today in my review of Doom 3. Before we get started, I just want to provide a couple of insights on how I'll be conducting my review. First and foremost, note that I am going to be providing this grading on a curve, specifically by providing leeway with graphic quality. I don't think it's necessarily fair to bring down a grade of a game just because it's older and the graphic quality may not be up to today's standards. However, that's not to say that I won't take graphics into consideration in my grading. I will definitely be looking for things like rendering issues, clippings, and such. I'm also going to try to keep this as casual as possible. I'm not going to get too analytical with it. So for the most part, these reviews are going to be kept to a list of pros and cons. And at the end, I will be providing an overall score. And that's going to be a grading of 1 through 10. Now, please keep in mind, for older titles such as this, I'm going to be providing the same leeway for those as well. All right, and just in case anyone is not aware of what Doom 3 is about, I'm going to provide a brief synopsis. Now, Doom 3 is a first-person horror shooter. In this critically acclaimed action retelling of the original Doom, players must battle their way through a demon-infested facility before entering the abyss to battle Hell's mightiest warrior and put an end to the invasion. It really doesn't get much simpler than that, folks. Now, a couple of notes as well. This was originally released back in 2004 for the PC by id Software. It has since gone through multiple re-releases and ports on other systems. However, today we are going to be reviewing the 2019 re-release on the PS4. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I do believe the version that I played is technically part of the BFG edition. However, I'm not 100% certain as it doesn't say BFG edition. I don't know if that's just a coincidence or if it's just a mistake or if it just doesn't say BFG edition. But this did come with the Resurrection of Evil and the Lost Missions expansion pack. I have not yet played those yet. I have every intention of doing so. But at the moment, I just want to keep this review strictly to the main campaign of Doom 3. Also, this doesn't come with a multiplayer as well, which for some reason I thought it did, but it doesn't. So just keep that in mind. Now, first I'd like to go ahead and go over some pros that I found with the game. First, it is a classic style shooter. It's really easy to hop onto and play. It's not complicated really at all. There's no, you don't have to do any kind of slide shooting or kind of peeking around corners, nothing like that. It's really simple, and I really enjoy that about that. Next, I'd like to talk about the enemy designs, which I really enjoyed in this game, particularly the Mancubus, Cacodemon, Pinky, and the Hell Knight. The Mancubus, for instance, has like this really cool Cthulhu design that I really appreciate. And it's got, of course, like it's classic like double arm cannons. They're really cool. The Cacodemons I think are fun because they kind of float around and move like they're balloon animals filled with helium, and every time you hit them, they tend to bounce around, or they run into each other. They bounce around. I really like that a lot. The Pinky Demon I think are adorable. Maybe that's weird. I don't know. But they're like this pig, bull, razorback looking demon that has like metal legs, which I don't know how the metal legs come into it, but I think it's, I don't know. I think it's a really cool design. And now the Hell Knight, it looks vastly different than the original design that they had for in the first Doom. However, I really liked what they did with the redesign for it. It's a little bit more on the simplistic side. but they are ginormous in this game, and their presence is definitely felt when they show up. Um, they're intimidating. They're strong. Whenever they walk, the ground shakes and the screen shakes, and it makes this loud thundering noise. And I just think it's incredibly cool, like little details that they do for the design, not only for just the Hell Knight, but for really all the enemies in the game. And I actually really enjoyed like really all the designs of the enemies in this. But particularly these four enemies I liked the most as far as like their design goes. And I just like kind of like how they play on screen. Next is going to be the weapons in this game are really fun for the most part. Particularly the chain gun is the kind of a mainstay with this series, and it is always fun to just rail off like a countless number of shots with a chain gun. And anytime you use it, you feel powerful. And I love that weapon in particular. There's a lot of other weapons that kind of shine as well, such as the machine gun I always found was really reliable. And of course, the chainsaw. Groovy, baby. Like, I love the chainsaw in this game. There's multiple times where like an enemy would be coming at you with their own chainsaw and everything. And it's like, oh, I have one of those too. And yeah, like the chainsaw is really reliable weapon. And I really, really enjoyed the weapons in this. A couple of them I had some issues with, but we'll touch that on a little bit later. Next is the overall atmosphere of the game. I think is one of the biggest strong points of this, and I think it's really important for this game in particular, because while it's a classic style shooter, because it's an older game, I think if it didn't have the horror elements that it does in this, I think it would actually hold the title back a little bit, because without those elements, I don't think this game would be as fun to play. Which brings me to the lighting in this is still really great for its time. It's really effective. I like how it looks. The shadows are really dark, especially if you're playing like on an OLED like I was. So sometimes enemies just come out of nowhere and it just out of just complete darkness, and startled me on more than one occasion. I'm actually going to end up doing like a super cut of all my jump scares that I had in this game. That's something that I'm really looking forward to doing. But that'll be a little bit down the line because that's going to take some time to do. Next is probably my favorite thing about this game was the sound design. Now this kind of goes back into the overall atmosphere of it and the horror elements, and the sound design in this is really incredible. What I really liked that they did was you have all these great guttural sounds with like not only the enemies in the game, but also the environment. So you would have like the steam pipes going off, metal grates clacking together, like just everything. It just kind of blends together, especially with like the opening of walls and doors. I can't tell you like how many times that I would jump, not because an enemy jumped out, but because a door opened up and I thought it was like an enemy an enemy instead of like this actual sound of the door opening up. Everything's really aggressive sounding, which I really liked. And even though there's no real music in this game, aside from this awesome kick-ass song that they have playing in the title menu and in the credits, but there is an interesting like chanting sound and droning sound throughout the game. And there's a couple of different versions of this, and I can't really pinpoint what it is about it, but I think it's something that is like, yeah, for this, I rather would have that than like 2016 score for Doom. Now, I love the heavy metal soundtrack for Doom 16 or 2016. It works perfectly for that version of Doom. However, for Doom 3, I think not having an overarching soundtrack to it during the gameplay makes for a much better experience. I think the horror elements are elevated, and just having that really, really subtle droning sound in the background and light chanting noises and the different versions of that, I think just make for a better overall experience for Doom 3. Now, a few cons. First and foremost, the one that comes to mind first is the autosave function. I think it could have been implemented a bit better. Throughout the playthrough, I felt like it autosaved at odd times. And there was more on one occasion if I happened to forget to do a manual save and I happened to die through the playthrough, it would send me back to the last autosave, which sometimes would be like 10 to 15 minutes prior. Now, would it take 10 or 15 minutes to get back to where you were if you just ran through it? It's like, well, no, of course not. And would it be so much of an issue if you just manually save more frequent? Is like, well, no, of course not. However, I think if you have a autosave function in your game, at least in this case, I think it should have been either saved more frequently automatically, or it should have saved at more appropriate moments within the game. Also, it's pretty easy to get caught in a corner between enemies, specifically smaller enemies and flying enemies. Now, there's multiple times throughout the game where I get caught in a corner and you can't just move out of the way or anything like that. You actually would have to like take the enemies out. And because they're small, sometimes it's kind of hard to do that, specifically if you're have like a particular weapon equipped. That was frustrating a few times. And on the topic of weapons, the reloading animations to me felt a little slow. And I felt like if you're trying to reload, it definitely left you open to attack. Is that a thing typically in first-person shooters? Sure, but like I don't know. For some reason, I just felt like the reloading animations were kind of slow for some weapons. Also, some of the weapons were not as effective as I would have liked them to be, and I think the biggest perpetrator of this is surprisingly the shotgun. Now, to me, I had multiple instances where I would shoot an enemy point blank, and they not go down. And I'm not talking like one or two shots. I'm talking about 3 to 4, sometimes even more shots for even like this the most basic enemy, like the zombie enemy or like the imp enemy. And could that be partially operator error? Yeah, I'm not the best first-person shooter player. I'm not going to claim to be. But usually, you know, when I'm using like a shotgun in a first-person shooter or even a third-person shooter, like if nothing else, the shotgun is a reliable weapon. And in this game, I didn't feel like it was really reliable, like really at all. Like if you had absolutely nothing else left, could it help you in a pinch? Yeah, but it was actually surprisingly one of my least favorite weapons in the game. And that also kind of brings me to the plasma rifle. Now, I love the plasma rifle. It was one of my favorite weapons in the game to use, especially towards the end part of the game. However, there was a few times, well, every time that I tried to use it, like if I'm like in a doorway or something, it would hit the doorway instead of like the enemy, even though the enemy would be like right in front of you. Now, I didn't have this issue with other weapons. It was really only the plasma rifle. And that could be just the animation design of the plasma bullets. I'm not an expert on like design or anything, so I really don't know if that's the case or not. But it seemed like it would just splash into the door frame instead of hitting the enemy instead. Whereas if I use like the machine gun or chain gun or whatever, and I happen to use it in a situation where I'm like in a doorway or kind of like adjacent to a hallway, it would hit the enemy. I didn't have to worry about it hitting like the top of a barrel or the corner of a hallway or like the edge of a doorway. Um, so just like little things like that. I also noticed some graphical glitches. Nothing game breaking or anything like that, but in the beginning of the game, there was a couple of enemies that got stuck into the walls. Towards the end of the game, I don't know if it had to do with like the game ramping up or whatever, but whenever you would take out an enemy, it seemed to be like stuck in its like death animation, and it wouldn't clear over until like you get closer to them. Then the death animation would finish. And also, some of the items in the game would not render properly. They would like pixelate, but once you got closer to them, they would render normally. So there's just a couple of things that I had noticed as far as like graphics are concerned. Otherwise, I think for graphics, I think they still hold up really well for this, especially for like the enemy designs and stuff. And like I said, none of the issues that I ran into graphically like crashed the game or anything. I never ran into any crashes or anything or had to restart the game. Those are just some things that I did notice for it. Platforming. There is some platforming in this. There's not a whole lot, but there is some. And holy crap, when they do come up, they were really frustrating for me. Now, I don't know if that's just, again, operator error on my part. I may just not be very good at platforming in a first-person shooter game. There was multiple times where I would just have like a fall death because maybe I didn't, hit the jump button right away or whatever. But there was a moment towards the end where I was just dying constantly, back to back to back. From fall damage, and started to get really frustrated. I had almost had to quit playing, but I ended up making it through it. Also, the fall damage on this is really sensitive as well, which I was surprised to see. You would basically kind of fall from like a height of whatever your character is, and you would get some fall damage, which was a little surprising, but it was just definitely something that I noticed. I think my biggest disappointment with the game, the game kind of just ends. The story just kind of ends, and there's no real closure or anything. It definitely feels like it's a setup to like another game. And there are DLCs included with this, but I haven't played those yet, so I don't know if those tie up any of the loose ends or anything that are in the game. But yeah, it just kind of like just ends. Now, it is an older title. Sometimes games just ended really quick. But I don't know. I was just kind of like, all right, well, I guess I gotta either play the DLCs or like, whatever. But I'm definitely going to check those out. I want to see them, and I want to play them and experience them as well. But that is not the biggest disappointment that I had with the game. The biggest disappointment that I had with the game, surprisingly, was how easy the boss enemies were to take out in this game. Now, there was one boss enemy that I had some trouble with, but once I figured out how to beat him, man, he was really easy to take out, and all of them. Even the last boss of the game is really easy to take out. Now, I did play this on normal mode. So could that factor into it? I don't know, maybe, but I mean, even on normal mode, I would think like in a game like Doom, or in a franchise like Doom, whether it's on like easy or normal, I would expect like the bosses to be like a little bit more powerful. Now, I did have the Soul Cube, which is in this game I actually like the Soul Cube a lot, but it did feel to be a little bit of a cheap to be able to use that in certain fights and stuff like that. But I definitely loved it when I had it and needed it, but it definitely made a lot of fights a lot easier. But yeah, I think that's really all that I have really for cons. I don't think there's anything like too bad with it. I definitely feel like the pros that I had with it are definitely outweigh the cons. Which is going to bring me to my overall score of Doom 3, which I am going to give Doom 3 a 8 out of 10. I think anybody that hasn't played this yet should definitely give it a shot. And even those who have played it that may have not played it in a while, I think it's definitely worthy of a revisit almost 20 years later. It still works as a shooter. It's got some legitimate jump scares in it, which surprised me. And I think it really works as a horror game as well. Now, could that be amplified by headphones? Of course, I played with headphones, and I don't typically play with headphones. But in this instance, I did, and I'm glad I did. I think it elevated the entire experience. Yeah, so Doom 3, everybody. 8 out of 10. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Comment down below what you thought about my review, what you thought about Doom 3. And if you have any suggestions for the future, you can also check out the other videos that I have available. There are a few ideas that I have from what I'm going to tackle next, but in the meantime, just keep it on the lookout. And yeah, thanks again, everybody. Until next time.